हेलो।
हाँ मैडम।
हाँ, सर स्टार्ट कर सकते हैं।
ओके ओके।
डॉक्टर भूमिका ज्वाइन।
जस्ट मिनट मैडम।
So, Dr. Bhumika, can we start? Yes, sure, ma'am.
Okay, so I start the meeting. Now our speakers has already joined us. So good afternoon, Dr. Bhumika madam, dear participants, teacher, students and others. I, Dr. Dhanse Devangan, welcome you all in 6th day of 1 week National E-Workshop jointly organized by Department of Chemistry, Geology and Botany, Government Lahari PG College, Chirmiri, District, Korea, Chhattisgarh. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce our today's speaker, Dr. Bharti Madam, Dr. Bhumika Madam, who is going to deliver a talk about tools and techniques of data collections. I really thank to Madam for giving our valuable time and being here with us in our busy schedules. So before inviting to Madam for her lecture, I would like to give a brief introduction about her. Madam is currently working as an assistant professor in the Department of Geology, Sundarbati Mahila College, Constituent College of Tilka Manjhi, Bhagalpur University, Bihar. She joined this college in year 2019. She did her UG, PG and PhD from Banaras Hindu University in area of geology. She completed her PhD in the year of 2019. Her PhD work is in the field of evolutionary ecology by utilizing Drosophila as a model organism and has published a paper in national and international journals related to her field of interest. Her area of research include evolutionary ecology, population genetics, and behavioral biology. So, with this word, I welcome again Dr. Bhumika Madam for today's lecture. Welcome, Madam.
Thank you, sir, for the kind introduction. First of all, I would like to extend my warm regards to Professor Aarti Tiwari, Principal of Government Lahari PG College, Convener Dr. Kavita Krishnamurthy, co-convener Sir Dr. Dhanse Devangan, Organizing Secretary Mr. Virendra Kumar, and other organizing committee members for inviting me here to give a speech on data collection method. So I would like to present my PPT. Is it visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Uh, the today lecture is on the tools and techniques of data collection. So before starting to the main lecture, I would first like to introduce about what is research and what is research methodology. Now the question comes, how do we define research? So the one of the most basic definition of research is that it is a process of discovering new knowledge, or it is the systematized effort to gain new knowledge. Now, what do we understand by systematized effort? Systematic investigation means it is in a planned way or in a planned manner. And why do we do it? To develop new knowledge or to contribute to the already existing knowledge. And how are we doing it? By gathering and analysis of information. So the National Academy of Sciences states that the object of research is to extend human knowledge of the physical, Either it could be physical sciences, biological sciences, or social sciences, what beyond what is already known. So what is research methodology? Research methodology is a way to systematically, that is in a planned manner, to solve a research problem. It is a science of studying how research is done scientifically. How are we doing the research? How are we going to find the new information in a scientific manner, in a planned manner rather than randomly? It deals with the data collection, it deals with the analysis, and it deals with the interpretation. Finally, it is reported. So what are the methods of research methodology? How, what are the steps which comes under research methodology? So before that, why should we do research? Why should a researcher do the research? Why should a student do the research? What is the motivation behind doing research? First,
Dr. Bhumika, please move your slide.
it is already moving.
But on the screen, it's not moving. Yes, now it is.
Okay, is it moving?
And go to slideshow option.
It was already in the slideshow option. Now, are you able to see the slide, third slide, motivation in research?
On the screen, it's for yes, motivation is research.
Okay, I think the connection is weak, that is why. Okay, why should we do research? What is the motivation behind research? So, first is to desire to get a research degree. So one of the basic thing why a student do research is, why a person do research is to get a master's or PhD degree, and along with its consequential benefits. And now what are the benefits that come along the research degree? It would be either like doing it would be either gaining a academic position in an institute or a university or college. Either it would be like doing some scientist position in R&D and research. Next is to desire to face the challenge. What are the challenges? There are several challenges which are present in the society. So one of the basic reason would be to challenge, to solve the challenges which are present in the society, with a person who is the person which are having concern over practical problems. Next is pure intellectual joy, the joy which comes with doing creative research, whether it comes with the research degree or not. Fourth one is to desire to be a service of society. So it could be like service of society. How we can do the service to society by doing research is by either education or by planning new methods to solve new problems. Next would be desire to get respectability. Like it is very well known that after doing research, there is a certain respect in the society as you're contributing to the new methods. Now, this slide shows the methods of doing research methodology. Is the slide visible?
Yes, madam, visible.
Okay. So first one is the problem identification. What do we mean by problem identification? That is formulation of new ideas. What is the formulation of new problem? How are we going to identify the problem? So one is to first go into the general topic and then narrow down into a specific research topic. So how are we doing it? Either it could be like discussing it with certain colleague, or going to a subject matter expertise in an academic institution. One goes to guide and then supervise the student or suggest the student a general topic, and then a student can narrow it down to his or her subject of interest. Then what after problem identification comes extensive literature review. So this is one of the most important step, is the extensive literature review. Why should one do the literature review? So what kind of literature? First the question comes, what kind of literature should be reviewed? What kind of literature should be studied before starting the research, before starting the new, before doing going into a new problem. Either it could be conceptual in nature, either it could be empirical in nature. What do we understand by conceptual literature? That those literature which concerns with the theories or core problem, core methodology. Now, empirical research comes with some data which has been already done by other individuals, previously done by, it is having already analyzed data and it is already presented before in certain journal or in other academic literature. So one needs to do literature review. Why? So that he or her can identify the gaps which is present between previous literature and the existing problem. So once the problem has been identified, the student or researcher goes for the hypothesis development. Then what do we understand by hypothesis? Hypothesis is a particular statement or a assumed statement which is going to be solved. So it is the basic research, it is the basic framework of the research. Without the hypothesis development, one cannot proceed further. So however, what are the steps? For example, one has to identify the null hypothesis, then one has to identify the alternative hypothesis, and then statistical testing is done between what is the difference between the null hypothesis, whether it should be rejected or whether it should be accepted. All this comes under the hypothesis development. If there is no relationship between variables, then we assume that the null hypothesis is accepted, and if there is difference between the two variables, then it is said that alternative hypothesis is accepted and null hypothesis would be rejected. So after hypothesis development comes the research design. So what does research design means? Either one student can already present his or her research design before getting started with the research in the form of synopsis, and it involves everything: why the study should be done, where the study should be done, what kind of data should be collected, from where the data should be collected, what kind of statistical analysis has to be done, and then in what form it should be presented and how it should be presented, in what time duration all the research is going to be done. Either it also depends on the amount of money that is available, amount of funding that is available. It also depends upon the time which is given to the prescribed researcher, like it should be either 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. In that definite amount of time, how much research, how much data analysis, collection and interpretation should be done. Next, after identifying the research design, then comes the data collection. And what do we done? No matter how much beautiful is your research design or how much important is your research design, if a researcher does not collect data properly, nothing can be done, because then the study would be totally flawed. Because the data collection, I would be dealing with all the methods. Data collection would be like what kind of data, either it should be qualitative in nature, either it should be quantitative in nature, how much data should be collected. Then comes the data analysis. After the data collection has been done, the data analysis should be done properly. What kind of analysis should be implied to the data? Either it could be t-test or it could be ANOVA or a regression. There are several kind of data analysis are there depending upon the type of study we are doing. Then after data analysis comes the interpret and report, like how we are interpreting the results and how we are reporting the results. Next, what is the meaning of data? Is the slide visible?
Slides are not moving on a screen. It is motivation in research showing.
Okay. Please move.
Yes, visible.
Yes, it is now visible. Meaning of data.
Yes, now it's.
Yes, ma'am.
Means I should
Yes, madam, it's visible.
this way only instead of going for the slideshow. I think it is more visible like this. So shall I continue?
Yes, get.
Okay, what do we mean by data? So if previous slide was not visible, here is the previous slide. We dealt about problem identification, literature review, hypothesis development, research design, data collection, data analysis, and how the data is interpreted and finally reported. Now, what do we mean by data? How are we going to define data? What are data? These are the raw information, that these are the unrefined information that are present. So these are the individual process pieces of facts. These are only the facts which needs to be processed, which needs to be organized, which needs to be structured, and then they are presented in a given context, in a context which we want to present it. Why are we doing the research in that context, so as to make them useful. So data are individual pieces of factual information recorded and used for the purpose of analysis. They are unrefined information and they needs to be processed, organized, structured or presented in a given context so as to make them useful. Next, they can be also defined as they are the special type of information generally obtained. How are they obtained? What are the methods? What are the tools? What are the techniques by which they are collected? They can be obtained through either observations, surveys, inquiries, or experimental methods, and they are usually generated as a result of human activity for the purpose of research. Now, the question comes, what points are needs to be considered while collecting data? So first question comes that what is our nature of investigation? What kind of investigation are we doing? Whether it is descriptive in nature, are we doing descriptive studies, are we doing analytical studies, means that which involves experimental methods which involve variables which are controlled by the researcher, or it is qualitative in nature, or it is quantitative in nature, it is exploratory. So there are different kind of research methods. First, we need to define what is the method of our research, what is the nature of our research. Next, then we move to nature of data required. So what is the nature of data required? Either it is primary data or it is secondary data. Primary and secondary data we would be dealing with in another slide, next few slides, and whether it is qualitative in nature, either it is quantitative in nature. Next, one of the most important point is what are the financial resources available. So based on the financial resources, based on the funding which are available to us, what kind of study, because normally if there is a crunch of financial resources, we cannot do many experiments. So based on that, we are planning our study. What is the available time study? If we are having several means ample of time, then obviously we can plan it in that way. If we are having, if it is like 6 month time, if one is doing a short project, then obviously available time is really like in months. If either it is in 3 months, 6 months, then based on the available time, the uh, entire study is formulated, and according to that study, the data is collected. What is the desired degree of accuracy? How much accurate data are we going to collect? And accuracy depends on the what are the tools and techniques of data we are going to have. So, if, for example, if one is collecting data through the telephonic interview, so obviously the accuracy would not be there as compared to having face-to-face interview. Okay, so in this way, we obtain that what is the desired degree of accuracy, or if we are doing some experimental methods, or if we are employing some experimental methods, then every variable is in our control and we are controlling the entire study. So obviously there the accuracy would be high as compared to other studies. Okay, so what are the data? Now we have already discussed what do we mean by data and what are the points that needs to be figured out while collecting data. So one of the broad way to classify data is on the basis of primary data and on the basis of secondary data. So slide is visible or not? Is the slide visible?
Yes. It's
Visible, ma'am.
Okay. So one of the broad method of classifying data is into primary data and secondary data, and within primary data and secondary data there are different ways to collect data. So then comes the primary data. What is primary data? That is method of data collection through the primary source. We all know that we all might be knowing few things about the primary data, and today we will discuss it in detail. So what is primary data? Primary data, first of all, is collected fresh for the first time, and the nature of data is originally character, and it is collected from the first hand experience. So it is more reliable since it is collected for the first time. So, and it has the originality in nature, it is more reliable and authentic in nature, and is unpublished, while the secondary data is usually statistically analyzed and it is published one, while primary data is the unpublished data. It could be either qualitative in nature, having qualitative character, or it can be either quantitative in numbers, quantitative in nature. So primary data is usually considered more valid in nature as compared to secondary data, and after analysis, after statistical analysis, the primary data can be used as secondary data. So how are we? First, we are going to discuss about primary and secondary data in the form of qualitative or quantitative data, because primary data can be classified into quantitative data and uh, uh, qualitative data. So first we need to understand what is the difference between qualitative data and quantitative data. So there are various units into which the qualitative data and quantitative data could be compared. So what is the research question? So in quantitative data, this is the quantitative data. How much, how many means it comes in numbers. Quantitative data, as the name suggests, it is quantifiable or it is in numbers. So we can obviously consider the statistical significance between the variable. How big is X? We can obviously quantify how big is X and how much is X. And if there are other variables such as Y variable, Z variable, so we can compare those variable, that how big is X from Y, how Y is big from Z, how much is X, how much is Y, how much, and how they are correlated with each other. And all the data, all the analysis is reported in numbers. All the data is reported in numbers. Now the qualitative question, what kind of research question are answers through qualitative data? Research question starts with why, what, and how. Why, what, and how. What is X? How is X? How varies and different. So it is very descriptive in nature. It is very subjective in nature as compared to quantitative data. So what is the selection of background? In what background the study is done? Laboratory setting or natural setting? Usually quantitative studies are done in laboratory setting or in natural setting. Usually in natural setting, observation is taken. Then selection of sampling methods. So what is the sampling methods? How the sample is collected from the entire population. Either it is random or a statistical sampling. We all know that sampling can be either it is of two types, non-probability and probability method. Random, in random sampling, each and every unit has the equal opportunity of being selected. So we would discuss about sampling method in quantitative data collection. So it is either random or statistical sampling having representative of population. Next, in qualitative, what is the selection of sampling method? It is theoretical purposive sampling. Purposing means the discretion, how the data should be collected depends on the depends on the will of the researcher according to the study. The researcher can decide what kind of data should be collected, what kind of sampling should be done with small sample sizes. Then what is the relationship of researcher and participant? Data from participant unaffected by researcher's thought. Since the whole study is very objective in nature, so it is unaffected from the researcher's thought. Everything depends on the statistical methods, on the numbers. It is unaffected. Whatever we are doing, we are getting. So next, in qualitative, what is the relationship between researcher and participant? The relationship between researcher and participant affected the data. So in this situation, there can be probability that a researcher can be biased towards the participants, or they could be unbiasedness also, but there might be some probability of biasness towards the participants, so it can affect the entire study. Researcher view and values can affect data collection and analysis. Since a little amount of biasness may be present, so the way the data is interpreted can be affected, and finally the analysis can be affected. What sort of data analysis should be done? It should be either numerical and a statistical analysis of variable, or it could be in qualitative, it is usually non-numerical data analyzed. Now finally, what is the output of the quantitative data? Descriptive statistics, correlation between two groups. So output usually in quantitative method is what is the correlation between the two variables, how they are getting affected by each other. Next is in qualitative, it is detailed description or explanation of the research problem. It is the qualitative data, qualitative studies usually descriptive nature, exploratory in nature. So we give the detailed description or explanation of the research problem. Next, in how what are the ways of collecting primary data? Usually we are dealing with qualitative data collection. So there are a number of ways in which primary qualitative data can be collected. For example, observation, interview, focus group, questionnaire, schedules. So these are one major category of collection of data. There are several small methods also, but today we will be dealing with these major categories of collection of data. Observation method. Now, what do we understand by observation? As the name suggests, one is going to observe. The entire study is based on the observation data. So, it is one of the most common used method of data collection in qualitative studies. One of the most common used method. So observation becomes a scientific tool. Here the tool utilized is just the observation of the researcher and method collection for the researcher. Observation, how we are going to, what are the units which one is going to collect, and how one is going to collect the observation. It involves watching, listening, reading, touching, and recording behavior and characteristics of the phenomena. So observation method can be categorized into several ways. First categorization is participant or non-participant observation. What do we understand by participant observation? Here, the observer observed by making himself more or less a member of the group. Here, the observer becomes the part of the group which he is going to study, and from here it could be either like members of the group might be knowing that the researcher is taking the observation, or members of the group may not know that the researcher is studying them. So researcher approaches participant in their own environment. Here is the natural setting is preferred rather than having the participant come to the researcher. So researcher is observing the participants in their own environment, in their own natural settings. So documentation relies, what kind of documentation, how the data is collected, it is totally depends on the memory. In memory, while how the data is being collected, how the data after the study is done, how much data is being inputted into the notebook. Memory, personal discipline, like how diligently the researcher is taking the notes, diligence of the researcher, and discipline, like he or she may not miss the points, because important points could be missed while observing the data and while noting down the data. So this kind of discipline should be needed. Like, he or she should have that capability of observing the participant and noting down the observation. Researchers make careful objective notes about what they see, recording all accounts and observation. So here the participant is becoming the member of the group and then observing the participants. Next comes non-participant observation. So what do we understand by non-participant observation? The observer is concealed, that is, he or she is disguised, and sample group members are not aware that they are being observed. So the members of the group which are being studied do not know that they are being observed by the researcher. So they are having their own they cannot, so in this, one of the advantages is that they cannot manipulate their behavior when they are being watched. Observation is more effective because in this case sample members are likely to behave naturally because they are not being watched. So what are the observation unit? What are we going to observe? In what ways we are going to collect the data? So first is appearance. Like, it includes clothing, age, gender. We are going to note down the clothing, what kind of clothes, either what is the age, what is the gender, physical appearance, anything. And because it all varies with profession, social status, socioeconomic class, religion, and ethnicity. Next is verbal behavior and interaction. How the members of the group who are being observed are interacting with each other, who speaks to whom and for how long, who initiates interaction, who is initiating the interaction. Such kind of studies are usually more preferable in healthcare research and sociology studies. So who speaks to whom and for how long, who initiate interaction, what is the language or dialect of the person. So it may vary with gender, age, ethnicity, profession of speakers, dynamics of interaction. What is the physical behavior and gesture, what people do, who does what, who interacts with whom, and who is not interacting. So what should researcher note? How people use their body and voices to communicate different emotions. How are they interacting with each other, what is the tone, what is the dialect, how they are interacting. That all comes under the physical behavior and gesture. What individual behavior indicate about their feelings towards one another, their social rank or their profession, how are they varying with these criteria. Then comes the personal space. How close people stand to one another, what individual preferences concerning personal space suggest about their relationship. Then comes human traffic, that how people are entering a certain group, how they are leaving a certain group, at what time they are entering a group, at what time they are leaving a group. These kind of study can also be done in the hospitals, where an observer is watching the activity of patients, where people enter and exit, how long they stay, who they are, and people who stand out, that who is getting more attention than the other people. What differentiate from there, whether people consult them or they approach, whether they are being isolated. Such kind of studies are, such kind of observation units are to be observed. So next comes, after participant and non-participating observation, comes structured and unstructured observation. So we know what kind of observation units are to be studied. So in structured observation, how are we going to collect the data? Data collection is constructed using specific variables and according to a predefined schedule. Here everything is predefined. Like, researcher already know that what should be observed, what should be the observation units, like, and when it should be observed. He knows, or she knows the timing of the unit, like when should be the observation made, how the observation should be recorded, what kind of accuracy, with what kind of accuracy the observations should be recorded, what should be the standardized condition of observation, under which standard condition the observation has to be done. It is considered more appropriate for descriptive studies, since all the data collection, all the units have already been discussed, like how everything should be done. how everything has to be conducted after getting to that place. Unstructured observation, it is conducted in an open or free manner, like nothing is predetermined, nothing, variables are not determined, objectives are not determined. A researcher usually goes to that place and collects whatever is happening in that situation. It is useful in exploratory studies where problem is not very clearly defined. So exploratory studies are those kind of studies where uh, the problem is very free flowing, it is not restricted. So unstructured observation are useful for exploratory studies. Now there are few examples in which observation methods are used. I would be showing all these example in the in the context of healthcare. So one of the study was done in 2021 using observation method to understand healthcare context. So the objective of the entire study was to observe the use of protective equipment during corona time among healthcare professionals. So personal protective equipment, how the healthcare professional are using the protective personal equipments during the corona times. So several hospitals were observed, several doctors and other attendants were observed that how they are using the personal protective equipment. So after observation, how the data is how the data was reported. For example, in which medical doctor post in which everything is very detailed in nature, a very descriptive in nature, depends on how the research is going to put down the observation. So everything is detailed, that a medical doctor pulls gown forward from the front, breaking the shoulder seal, and then pulls the gown at the waist to break the tie. So everything is detailed, like puts gown in trash, then walks out, stopping briefly in doorway to speak to other attendants, then everything. Then in the same way, less descriptive is MD1 removes PPA and performs hand hygiene. One of the most simplistic way, but this one is the more better way because it is first descriptive in nature. In this way, the observation data are reported. And next, one of the another study is, it is a very old study where the participant observation as a patient in a rehabilitation hospital. So what was done in order to obtain a subjective evaluation of the admission process, a new patient settled into the routine, and to learn something about the attitude patient had about the hospital, a senior author posed as a patient. So senior author, senior doctor, he in a disguised form went to the hospital, remained there for 5 days, and then uh, observe the activities of all the patient, how they are behaving with each other, how they are interacting with each other, what are their mentality, what are their futuristic vision. So everything was observed, and based on that, the entire entire study was done. There are few other methods also, there are few examples also. If interested, everyone can go and read it. It is one of the recent paper in cancer care, how are decision made in cancer care, or qualitative study using participant observation of current practice. So how decision making is done in cancer care, whether it is shared in nature or whether it is unshared in nature, while people are interacting among each other, while decision making, what kind of like in how they are interacting with each other during the decision making, whether it is between the patient, it is between the patient and doctors, everything was observed here. Next, what are the advantages and disadvantages of observation method? First is, researcher can have first-hand experience with the participant. Participant are directly observed with the researcher without in between any barrier. They are directly observing the participant. Collect data where and when an event or activity is occurring. Does not rely on people's ability to provide information, since the data is collected directly, no third person is involved. So the data is collected directly, allows you to directly see what people do rather than relying on what people say they did. Can provide information previously unknown to researcher that is crucial for project design, data collection, and interpretation of other data. So after the observation is made, other methods can also be employed to test the authenticity of the observation method. Now comes what are the disadvantages of the observation method. It is really susceptible to manipulation. The participant can manipulate their behavior, that is, people usually perform better when they know they are being observed, although indirect observation may decrease this problem, and this is called as Hawthorne effect. The Hawthorne word comes because it was first identified in the Hawthorne area of Illinois. So it can be expensive because observer is observing for a very long time, so it can be expensive and time consuming compared to other data collection method. Does not increase your understanding of why people behave as they, why people are behaving in that manner. It does not increase either, but it can be hypothesized that why people are understanding that in that manner. So difficulty of documenting the data is hard to write while observing and while noting down. It might be possible that few points might be missed. So inherently subjective exercise where researchers requires objectivity. Research requires objectivity, but it is very subjective in nature and may be biased. Either maybe the observation may be biased in nature. So here is an example of more objective and more subjective reporting. The waiting room of the antenatal clinic was empty except for one girl who looked to be approximate 5 to 8 years old. She was sitting in the corner behind a chair. She peeked out from behind it and looked at us when we entered the room talking. Her nose was running and her eyes were red and swollen. So what is more objective, how objectively is data reported. Like whatever is observed, it is being reported. The researcher is not trying to discuss why it is happening. So what is the more subjective reporting? The waiting room of the antenatal clinic was deserted except for a young girl who had been abandoned there by her mother. So researcher is assuming that the girl has been abandoned by her mother. So she had been wedged into the corner. Like here, she's sitting behind the corner. She has been wedged into the corner. Researcher is again assuming that she has been wedged into the corner and she wouldn't wander off. She glared at us because we were making so much noise. She had probably been crying for a long time. Here, the reporter is just reporting, researcher is just reporting that her nose was running and her eyes were red and swollen. But here, the researcher is assuming that she had been probably been crying for a long time, but the researcher actually does not know what has been happening previously. Now next comes the interview method. What do we understand by the interview method? So interview method is a collection technique that involves oral questioning of the respondents. So yeah, it depends on the visual stimuli and oral and visual responses. Oral and verbal responses, could be either personal or through interphonic, telephonic. It would be either personal in nature or it is telephonic in nature. So there are three fundamental type of research interview, similar to what was observed in observation: structured, semi-structured, and unstructured. So what is structured interview? It is the list of already the questions which are to be asked are already predetermined with little or no variation and with no scope for follow-up question. Like if there is a predetermined question, so there would be no follow-up question. Whatever is said would be recorded. All respondents receive the same question in order. Interviewer attempts to play a neutral role. Interviewer does not ask question further and therefore plays a neutral role rather than emotionally biased. It is quick and easy to administer. For example, is your health excellent? The response should come in good, fair, or poor. Have you smoked earlier? The response should be either in yes or no. Does the family has history of genetics diseases? The response would be either in yes or no. In semi-structured interview consists of several key questions that help to define the areas to be explored. It is not really objective in nature, and further follow-up questions could be asked, and it is relatively detailed as compared to unstructured structured interview. And participants are free to respond to these open-ended questions as they wish, and the researcher may probe these responses further. So here is one example from a journal where parents experience of their sleep and rest when admitted to hospital with their child. It is a qualitative study. So a qualitative interview study was conducted using semi-structured individual with 17 parents admitted together with their ill child for shorter or longer period at pediatric wards at University Hospital in Sweden. So what kind of example would you please share? So these are not very objective in nature, these are subjective questions. So would you please share your experience of sleeping at the hospital with your ill child? So a respondent would not give an answer in either yes or no, it would be more descriptive in nature. Do you find that good sleep affect your parenthood? Then after the answer, do you find the probing question, do you find that lack of sleep affect your parenthood? Do you find that the staff trying to facilitate that sleep and rest of parents? So these are the examples of certain types of questions which are being asked in a semi-structured interview. So unstructured interview, the interviewer is allowed much greater freedom to ask questions. It is more like a conversation rather than a specific question or predefined question. Interviewer has a relatively greater freedom while recording the responses to include some aspect and exclude certain aspects. Now, what are the advantages and disadvantages? Advantages of interview is it is deep and free response. It is very flexible in nature and adaptable in nature, and one can actually glimpse into since personal interview is taking place. When personal face-to-face interview is taking place, then responses could be responses. What kind of response in either in tone or gestures could be noted down. So the ability to probe, follow up, clarify misunderstanding about question is there. There's a probability to clarify misunderstanding questions which has been misunderstood. So what are the disadvantages? Costly in time and personal in nature. It is impractical when there are a large number of patients or large number of participants to be interviewed. It is highly impractical to interview each and every participant. Requires skill. So what it definitely requires a skill in which the interview is being taken. May be difficult to summarize responses, and possible biases may be present in interviewer respondent situation. Now next come focus group. What do we understand by focus group? A focus group is a group discussion on a particular topic organized for research purpose. What is focus group? It is a group discussion on a particular topic, and researcher here does not act as interviewee or observer. He or she act as a facilitator or moderator of the group activity. So what happens is that we need to, what are the basic path of action for focus group discussion is we need to recruit the right participants. So if we are discussing on a particular topic, if any particular healthcare topic is discussed, we need to have the right participants in the group. One cannot randomly take participants from anywhere and put them together in a room and ask them to discuss about certain things. So participants should have the knowledge of the topic which is being discovered. Then we need to choose a moderator. Moderator could be researcher here plays the role of a moderator or facilitator, and he or she gives the direction to the topic which is being discussed, in what way it should be discussed. Record the meeting. So the entire meeting is being discussed. It is being recorded for the future purposes. Write clear discussion guideline and then generate a report and use the data to make a plan of action. But what kind of action should be now taken after the particular topic has been discussed. It is really cost effective and promising alternative in participatory research where a number of participants are being number of participants are there. So data consists of usually tape recorded group discussion between 4 to 10 participants who share their thought and experience with the researcher regarding the particular topic. So main aim is to investigate people opinion, attitude and belief. What do people think about certain situation? What do people think about if there is a marketing or any other consumerism behavior is being studied? What are the people's opinion about that particular product? Or if healthcare research or certain medicines are being taken, so what are their opinion about that particular medicine? Either they are having side effects or not. Everything is being discussed. So example, there's one example. How do you feel about the leprosy program? So what this kind in if a focused discussion is being conducted to know how participants feel about the leprosy program to adults receiving the multi-drug therapy for leprosy. The questions allow respondent to discuss the things they are happy or dissatisfied with. Like they would tell about either they are happy with the leprosy, either multi-drug therapy, or they are dissatisfied with the multi-drug therapy. It does not draw attention to any particular aspect of the program. So here any particular thing is not focused. It is free flowing in nature. Does not define, the moderator does not define the pathway. He may provide certain cue, but he obviously does not define the pathway of the group discussion, and it is free flowing. And in this way the qualitative observations, qualitative data are being noted. Next comes the questionnaires part. So what is questionnaire? Questionnaires is a formalized set of questions for obtaining information from respondent. So these are the particular set of questions that are obtained from the which are provided to the respondents, and from them the answers are being taken and then collected. So it is a widely used method of data collection. It is adopted by private individuals, research workers, private and public organizations, and even by government. So questionnaires may contain open-ended or closed-ended or a mixture of both. Open-ended means they have the follow-up question is there for the particular question. Like if there is like it is very descriptive in nature. Respondent can respond in a descriptive manner, and in closed question only few options are given. One has to tick mark, or a mixture of both. An open-ended question can be answered in many ways according to the preference of the person being interviewed or filling in the form. Closed question must be recorded in a specific way. Example of closed question are those requiring a yes or no answer or tick box question. So what are the open-ended questions? So if one is asking for transportation from someone, which form of transport do you regularly use to travel outside your village? So one will give answer in a descriptive manner and data would be collected. Next, in the last 3 months, which form of transport have you used to travel outside your village? Like in what? Either to animal, through the use of bicycle, car or bus. Next, how would you describe your ethnicity? Please tick which of the following best describe your ethnicity, and what challenges do you face when attempting to use government health services. So it is descriptive in nature. It is open-ended question. There are in many ways a respondent can answer the question, but in closed question, have you faced any challenges in accessing government health services during the past 12 months? So answer would be only 3 options are available. The respondent would give answer with yes, no or not applicable. So here is one of the study. So here is one study, a brief questionnaire for assessing patient healthcare experiences in low income setting. This study was done using the questionnaire method, and the study has been published in International Journal for Quality in Healthcare. So what was the objective of this study? The objective was this study was to develop and to assess the validity and reliability of 2 brief questionnaire for assessing patient health experience for hospital with hospital and inpatient and outpatient care in low income setting. Like how are the patient responding to the health care in low income setting condition? So what was the design? So data from focus group, we develop questionnaire to assess patient experience with inpatient and with outpatient care in low incoming setting, inpatient, the patient which are already admitted, which are being admitted, and outpatient which they just visit the doctor for consultation. So questionnaires were admitted in person by trained individuals. So setting was done where the study was conducted. Study was conducted at eight health facilities in Ethiopia, and obviously the what kind of participants should be there, everything is determined before doing the uh, questionnaire study. Patient should be more than 18-year-old and should have stayed at the hospital for more than 1 day, and the sampling was 486 people were questioned, and for hospital inpatient service the sample size was 230. So what was the conclusion, the how the care delivery was in low income setting? The questionnaires are brief and can be integrated. What are the importance of questionnaire studies? The questionnaire are brief and can be integrated into health system, strengthening effect and support of leadership at the health facility at the country level. So what kind of questions were administered? So what kind of questionnaires were given for inpatient assessment of healthcare as well as outpatient assessment of healthcare? Is it visible? It is very small, but I will read few questions how the questionnaires is made. So during this hospital stay, how often did nurse treat you with courtesy and respect? What was the how was the hospital is stay? Did nurses listen carefully? So in this way, the questionnaires were made, and the options were never, sometime, usually, always, and in this way data were collected and it was analyzed. So what is the merit? It is low cost in nature. It is free from bias of the interviewer. Answers are in respondent own words. So if the questionnaire is being mailed to the respondent, then they get adequate time to think for answer. It is non-approachable respondents. If the respondents are not very approachable, so the questionnaires can be mailed to them and they can easily respond to it. Large sample can be used, so results are more reliable. Demerits can be only used when respondents are educated, means they need to read it, and so therefore it is very important that respondent needs to be educated for cooperation. There is highly inflexible, since the questions are already predetermined, so it is inflexible method to collect the data. Difficult to know the expected respondent have filled the form or it is filled by someone else. We do not know who is filling the time, and it is usually time consuming, expensive data collection method. Then next comes the schedule method. So schedule method is similar to the questionnaire method, only the difference is that it is being filled by enumerator, that is person who is going to take the study, who are especially appointed for the purpose, and they fill up the schedule and assist the respondent. So enumerator should be very carefully selected, since they should know about the objective of the study, they should know about the knowledge, they should have the knowledge of the study which is being conducted. So they have to possess the capacity of cross examination in order to find out the truth, whether respondent is faking the answers or whether they are genuinely answering the question. In a structured interview, schedule can be used as data collection tool. So population census all over the world is conducted through this method. It is expensive, but it is reliable method. Now comes the quantitative data collection method. So quantitative, we have already discussed about the qualitative data collection method. So here we are dealing with the primary quantitative data collection. So there are a number of ways in which quantitative data collection method, and it might be similar to the qualitative data collection, only the data analysis part varies. So survey research, collection of data attained by asking individual question by either in person or paper. Correlational, how the two variables are collected on this kind on the basis of this kind of study. The data is collected, the variables are measured, and then the statistical relationship is developed between them. Casual comparative research to find relationship between independent and dependent variable after an action or event has already occurred. After the observation has been made, the comparative research is made between the two variables. Experimental research, researcher manipulate one variable and control and randomizes the rest of the variable. So there are several sampling methods which are used for the collection of data in quantitative methods. So both in qualitative as well as quantitative method. So there are two type of sampling method: probability and non-probability method. So sampling is what kind of units and like how we are going to collect the units, how the each of the unit is collected from the entire population, what kind of units are being studied. So difference between the two types is whether or not the sampling selection involves randomization. Randomization occur when all members of the sampling frame have an equal opportunity of being selected. So every unit from the population has equal opportunity of being selected for the study. Then that is called as randomization. What is probability sampling? It uses randomization and takes steps to ensure all members of a population of a chance of being selected, rather it is not biased in nature. So these are several types, like random sampling. Every unit has an equal chance of selection. Stratified random sampling, divide population into strata, and from each stratum the units are chosen. Systematic random sampling, every 10th unit we know that this particular unit needs to be chosen. So this is systematic random sampling. Cluster area sampling, divide population, the population is divided into different clusters, and from those clusters the samples are chosen. Then multi-stage random sampling, here their different sampling methods are combined to collect. The non-probability sampling does not depend on randomization. It is upon the discretion of the researcher as to what kind of sampling method, what kind of unit needs to be chosen. It is not at all random in nature. So it is either accidental, haphazard, or convenient sampling. The units are sampled according to what is convenient to the researcher, or it could be accidental in nature or haphazardly available. Purposive sampling, it has been discussed during the qualitative and quantitative comparison. So unit from the pre-specified group are purposely sought out and sampled. Again, it is upon the discretion of the researcher as to what kind of units are to be chosen. Then modal instance sampling, what is the most common occurrence unit, what is the most common occurred unit in the population, that kind of unit is chosen. Expert sampling, units which are identified as having particularly high quality of information, those units which are having high quality of information are chosen. So next come the secondary source of data. So we know about the primary data that it is original in character, which is freshly uh, prepared data. So data which have been already collected by someone. Secondary data is already collected by someone and it has passed through the statistical process. So researcher has to look for various sources while collecting the secondary data, and it could be either unpublished or published in nature. So what is published data and what is unpublished data? So published data are actually already present. So it could be either government publication, semi-government publication. So example is the company published their financial statement in the form of quarterly or half-yearly annual report. And what are unpublished data? These are usually private firm, business enterprises, research work which are not available in the record due to various reason, due to privacy or variety of reason. So sources, what are the sources of secondary data? It could be either public in nature or private in nature. So government data, electoral data, tax record, housing information, association of census report, reports of international organizations such as World Health Organization, UNESCO, then newspaper, magazines, and other form of media report, schools, hospital, agriculture institution generated data, then research studies and other form of academic literature, technical and trade journal. And what a personal and private record? Later personal diaries, autobiography, memories, inquiries, or investigation of private nature for use of their members only. So while collecting secondary data, reliability of data should be checked, whether the data are reliable or not. So to check the reliability, we should know that who collected the data, what were the sources of data, whether it was collected by proper methods or not, whether the accuracy is there, or whether while collecting the data there was biasness or not, whether time and situation, what was the time and situation while collecting the data, whether suitability of, what is the suitability of data, whether the object, scope and nature of the original inquiry matches the present inquiry or not. If the original, so secondary data is basically the collected data, reviewed primary data. So the object, scope and nature of the original inquiry which is being reviewed should match the present inquiry, and adequacy of data also should be checked. So the final, after all these slides, now the question comes whether we can decide on the method of data collection or not. So consider the following statistical: which method of data collection would you use to collect data for each study? A study of the effect of exercise on relieving depression. So what kind of a study is the focus of the study is the effect of exercise on relieving depression. What kind of effect does exercise have on relieving depression? And the population is the collection of all people with depression. So an experiment would be appropriate for the statistical study. So one has to do the experiment whether uh, the exercise, whether exercise helps in relieving depression or not. So different groups can be made, whether one group is made to do the exercise and one group is not made to do exercise, and then we can compare what effect are being observed. The study of the success of graduate of large university in finding a job within 1 year of graduation. So it is totally a survey based method. A survey would be appropriate for this statistical study. One has to survey whether the graduate of a university are able to find the job in within 1 year of graduation or not. So here we can decide what kind of method of data collection we can have. So with this, I would like to close this presentation, and yes, now the session is open for discussion.
Okay, thank you, madam. It was really a nice presentation. So participants, you have, if you have any doubts, you can ask. Hello.
I think there is no question. Sir, you have any question?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any your personal question? You can ask. Dr. Bhumika, it was very pleasant to hear you after a long time. And your presentation was very beautiful, and you explained all the things very nicely about the methods of data collection and based on the different types of research. It was very clear, and I think there is no scope of any doubt.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. I hope the students
Adding to every student,
from the presentation, they actually could imply these like information in further in their studies.
yes.
So, that is the hope here.
I request MSc student, please ask if you have any doubt, any kind of doubt. Because these methods you used in your dissertation work, so you can ask freely.
हेलो गुड आफ्टरनून मैम.
Good afternoon.
मैम नॉन न्यूमेरिकल डाटा एनालिसिस को अगर आप फिर से डिफाइन करेंगी तो मुझे थोड़ा समझ नहीं आया था.
Non-numerical data is usually qualitative in nature. Like जो numerical data होते हैं वो numbers के ऊपर based होते हैं. Like कि जो variables होते हैं, suppose that height है, weight है, तो ये सारे आप numbers में नोट डाउन करते हैं, इनके डेटा आप नंबर्स में नोट डाउन करते हैं। लेकिन जो नॉन न्यूमेरिकल डेटा होते हैं वो क्वालिटेटिव उनका नेचर होता है। जैसे कि कैसे हुआ, कोई चीज़ अगर आप ऑब्जर्व कर रहे हैं किसी सेटिंग में, तो वो कैसे हुआ आप ये जानना चाहते हैं, क्यों हुआ, तो आप इनको नंबर्स में नहीं बताओगे, आप इनको किस में बताओगे, डिस्क्रिप्टिव वे में बताओगे। तो यही डिफरेंस है नॉन न्यूमेरिकल डेटा और न्यूमेरिकल डेटा में। और इसका जो एनालिसिस होता है वो भी डिफरेंट होगा। आप एनालिसिस मीन्स समवॉट मतलब आप कैसे उसको प्रेजेंट करते हो वो भी थोड़ा बहुत डिफरेंट होता है।
ओके मैम, थैंक यू।
Okay, any other doubts, participants? Okay, so now I invite Mr. Viren Sahu sir for vote of thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Dhanraj sir. A graceful and warm afternoon to our most valued speaker, Dr. Bhumika, ma'am, worthy assistant professor, professors, and most beloved participants. It is my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on the 1 week national e-workshop. I, Virendra Kumar, on behalf of Government Lahiri PG College Chirmiri, District Korea, and the entire fraternity of the college, first of all, I extend my most sincere thanks to the Lord God on my behalf. I extend a very hearty vote of thanks to the eminent speaker, Dr. Bhumika ma'am, who spared time from her busy schedule to grace the e-workshop. I thank all the participants, organizing team, and colleagues for gracing your crucial work and sharing with us your opinion and finding their present time. I once again want to state that we are grateful to our eminent speaker and beloved all participants. We thank you for being with us this time. It has been great pleasure. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bhumika.
Thank you.
So,